welcome back to the Global Sustainable Island Summit 2026 here in Gran Canaria. Yesterday, we officially opened this global conversation, bringing together voices from across island communities worldwide, highlighting not only the challenges we share, but also solutions we are already building together. Today, we continue that journey because sustainability in island territories is not a distant ambition. It is a present reality that demands collaboration, innovation, and bold leadership. And it is precisely what this summit represents. Through the work of island innovation, this platform has grown into a unique global network connecting islands across regions and enabling the exchange of knowledge and turning ideas into practical solutions that can be implemented in real contexts. Through today's sessions, we will explore key topics shaping the future of island sustainability, from energy systems and climate adaptation to the blue economy, tourism, and innovation. Let's continue then building this conversation together. During the first session, our experts will explore how islands can ensure reliable and stable energy systems while accelerating the transition to renewables, one of the most pressing challenges for islands communities today. This session is called this is an opening high-level panel, and its name is A Global Vision for Sustainable and Resilient Islands. The moderator will be the CEO of Island Innovation, James Ellismore. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Laura, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back here for day 2 of the Global Sustainable Island Summit with this high-level panel to kick things off. The idea of this session is to have a range of voices and perspectives from different parts of the world looking at how islands are approaching sustainability. And so we'll have a series of short interventions looking at these different perspectives. As we discussed in the opening, there are many different diverse cases of how islands are looking at their transition and a systems approach that's really necessary to look at all the aspects of sustainability, agriculture, energy, water, tourism, and all the linkages between these different areas. To kick things off, I would like to start with a video that we will introduce, which is from the Honourable Minister Catherine Ebanks-Wilkes, who is Minister for Health, Environment and Sustainability from the Cayman Islands government. Minister Ebanks-Wilkes, unfortunately, able to join us at the last minute, but we're very happy that the Cayman Islands government is here. It has submitted this video to share.
Hello, everyone, and warm greetings from the Cayman Islands. I'm sorry that I can't be with you in person in Gran Canaria for the start of the Global Sustainable Islands Summit 2026. It is a privilege to join you via video, and I thank the organizers for convening such an important forum, bringing together leaders, policymakers, and practitioners committed to shaping a more sustainable future for island nations. While our islands may differ in geography, size, and economic structure, we share common realities. We're on the front line of climate impacts. We're developing rapidly, both institutionally and physically. We see the effects of climate change and rapid development along our coastlines, in our agriculture, and across our marine and terrestrial ecosystems. And many of us remain dependent on imported fuel, food, and other goods. These realities present undeniable challenges, but they also present a shared opportunity to develop solutions that are grounded in our context, shaped by our heritage, and focused on a more resilient future. In the Cayman Islands, we view health, environment, and sustainability as deeply interconnected. The health of our people is inherently linked to the health of our environment. Our communities thrive when we have beautiful, clean beaches, protected areas, a diversity of native plants and animals, and policies that have been designed with long term sustainability and resiliency in mind. Like many of your nations, ours has a long and proud seafaring heritage. Our identity is rooted in living in harmony with nature and in a deep respect for the seas that sustain our food systems, our economy, and our way of life. That connection continues to guide our national policies and priorities today. At the same time, we must acknowledge a broader reality. Small island nations, despite contributing the least to global emissions, are among those experiencing the most immediate and significant impacts of climate change. We also rely on key economic activities like financial services and tourism to support our economy. In these times, diversity is not only crucial when it comes to nature, but for our economy as well. For countries like the Cayman Islands, often classified as high income yet highly exposed to climate and economic shocks, this presents a real constraint. In the Cayman Islands, we are responding by strengthening how we understand and measure resilience at a national level. That is why the government of the Cayman Islands has embarked on a first of its kind development for Cayman and creating our own tool that measures our resilience. The Cayman Islands Resilience Index, or CIRI, is a strategic action from our Climate Change Policy 2024 to 2050. The project publicly launched in October last year and is now in development at prototype stage. CIRI will serve as an online decision informing platform to evaluate how investments and projects from both public and private sector contribute to our overall resilience. I believe that CIRI will enable us to prioritize investments and demonstrate clear outcomes to partners and financiers. It reflects the principles of integrating climate risk assessment and resource allocation from global frameworks benchmarked into practical, country level action. But importantly, the development of the Resilience Index is not just about measurement, it is about embedding resilience into how the government plans, invests, and also makes decisions. And it is about strengthening our ability to access the right kind of finance on the right terms to support long term sustainable development. Alongside this work, we continue to take tangible action on the ground. Over the past 6 months, we've been working to finalize 6 key interventions to support the Cayman Islands government in creating the right conditions for expanding residential solar generation across our islands. This work forms part of the UK Overseas Territories Climate Security Programme, delivered through the FCDO's Green and Resilient Energy Transition work stream, now in its second phase. These interventions, shaped through extensive consultation with stakeholders, will help us achieve the goals set out in our National Energy Policy 2024 to 2045. In March, we announced the establishment of the Cayman Islands' first national park, Hemington Forest, located in Cayman Brac, protecting 194 acres of biodiverse landscape for current and future generations. The government has also approved other areas to become protected under law, and plans for these are now being developed. This signals our commitment to the UK Overseas Territories biodiversity strategy, aligned with the 30 by 30 global goal and the nature-based solutions in our climate change policy. These initiatives are supported through strong partnerships, including with the United Kingdom and the European Union. These collaborations have been critical in turning policy into practical, measurable outcomes. And that spirit of partnership is in our nature. We may be separated by oceans, but we are united by experience, united by vulnerability, and increasingly united by purpose. We may be separated by oceans, but we are all united by experience. We're united by vulnerability and increasingly united by purpose. Because the challenges we face are all shared, so too must be the solutions. So as you begin your discussions over the coming days, I encourage you to build on that shared purpose, to exchange knowledge openly, to challenge assumptions with courage and genuine curiosity, and to pursue solutions that are not only innovative, but are equitable, practical, and grounded in the realities of island life. In the Cayman Islands, we are committed to being part of that collective effort, to share what we are learning, to listen to what others are doing, and to work together to shape a more resilient future for all of our communities. If you would like to learn more about the Cayman Islands Resilience Index and our wider sustainability work, send an email to sustainability@gov.ky. Because while we are islands by geography, we are not islands in purpose. And when island nations move forward together, we are not small, we are powerful. Thank you, and I wish you all a productive and inspiring Global Sustainable Island Summit 2026.
Thank you, Honourable Minister, for that intervention. And I'm happy to say that the Cayman Islands is well represented at this year's summit through other delegations who have joined us today. We'll move on to our next speaker, who's also representing another UK Overseas Territory. Delighted that we are joined by the Honourable Julian Fraser, the Deputy Premier of the Government of the British Virgin Islands, who is joining us today. Deputy Premier and the strong delegation from the Virgin Islands will be later launching the Climate Trust Fund, which I'm sure you'll be mentioning, which is a very, very interesting project. So, Deputy Premier, you're welcome to take the podium.
Your Excellency Antonio Morales, President of Gran Canaria, ministers, dignitaries, distinguished participants, thanks to James and the team from Island Innovation. Good morning. This is the day. The Virgin Islands is a chain of over 60 islands, rocks, and keys in the northeastern Caribbean that has set its sights on becoming the world's first climate-smart island chain. That is not a slogan. It is a governing framework adopted through our climate change agenda. It is a whole-of-territory vision built around 5 interlocking commitments that we believe every island economy should make to build resilience. These pillars are an island chain, where ecosystems are protected and restored, where our economy is resilient and diverse, where infrastructure is built to withstand the future climate, where clean, renewable energy powers our island, and where an empowered and engaged community shape our future. Allow me to walk briefly through each one. where work is actively taking place. Firstly, in respect of ecosystem protection and restoration, we are advancing a comprehensive environment and climate change bill, our most significant piece of environmental legislation in a generation. Secondly, in the economic space, the Virgin Islands is working to ensure resiliency in our traditional twin economic pillars, financial services and tourism. Among the innovative and exciting initiatives on the horizon are disaster and climate risk reduction clinics. Clinics which will provide tourism property and business owners with free access to expert professional advice on climate resilient strategies. In financial services, we are committed to ensuring that our islands do not become an uninsurable jurisdiction as climate change risk mounts, but that insurance remains accessible and affordable for all. Our strategic Blue Economy Roadmap, supported by an implementation framework, charts a course to develop the blue growth pillars, including new and emerging opportunities such as ocean-based renewable energy, deep-sea minerals, and marine biotechnology. Thirdly, in terms of infrastructure, we are benchmarking our standards for resilience against our 2017 experience with 2 record-breaking Category 5 hurricanes and a 100-year flood event. Hurricanes Irma and Maria, resulting in catastrophic damage to a third of our built stock. Critical infrastructure and facilities were unspared. That experience has become the forcing function for our commitment to climate resilience infrastructure. Our radical but impressive goal is for roads, drainage systems, energy and water systems, sewage systems, hospitals and clinics, community centers and schools to remain intact and functional after these types of events. Fortunately, in the arena of clean, renewable energy, we have set a target of 60% renewable energy by 2030. That is ambitious, but achievable and necessary. The island of Anegada, the most northerly and most isolated of the Virgin Islands, is already almost entirely solar powered. This is proof of concept for what is possible across the chain. Lastly, none of this works without empowered people. Climate resilience is not delivered from government offices. It is built in communities. That is why, for example, we are planning partnerships with banks to roll out revolving low-interest loan facilities to pave the way for home and business owners, farmers and fishers to afford implementation of a wide array of projects to make their properties and operations climate resilient and carbon neutral. The Virgin Islands has set a bold vision for becoming the world's first climate-smart island chain. But without breaking the barriers to accessing international climate finance inherent to overseas territories, we can only have but so much wind in our sails. So, in conclusion, I am pleased to share that later today, right here at the GSIS, our delegation will launch the Virgin Islands Climate Change Trust Fund, our innovative solution to mobilizing international climate finance at scale to drive and sustain our climate-smart vision. The Trust Fund is a model that we believe can serve for islands across the world. So let me be the first to personally invite you all to the Trust Fund launch to celebrate and learn with us. Details will be shared on the main stage. I leave you with a thought for reflection throughout this summit and beyond. Our approach demonstrates that small islands economies do not need to choose between development and resilience. When resilience becomes the framework and every infrastructural investment, economic policy, and legislative instrument is shaped by the question of whether it makes us more capable of withstanding and recovering from climate shocks, development and resilience becomes the same project. The world's first climate-smart island chain will be built by the sustained and coordinated effort of a community that has decided that its islands are worth protecting, and that is the future worth building. The Virgin Islands has made that decision. We welcome partners to share it with us. I thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Premier, and we look forward to joining the opening this afternoon in the side events room. Appreciate you and your delegation being here at the Global Sustainable Island Summit for the launch of this very innovative finance initiative. Now, moving on to our next speaker, it's important that also at this kind of forum we engage with multilateral organizations, and you would have heard yesterday from the International Renewable Energy Agency. Delighted that in person we have the Director of Country Engagement and Partnerships at IRENA, Mr. Gerbus Gonal, who has joined us. So over to you, Director.
Thank you very much, James. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning to all of you, and I would like to thank at the outset to the Cabildo de Gran Canaria and Island Innovation for this great opportunity to IRENA to present our perspective on small islands' clean energy transition. In fact, we are going through difficult times, and the world confronts a deep uncertainty marked by extreme volatility in energy markets driven by sharp, unpredictable swings in oil and gas prices. And the ripple effects are clear to all of us, far-reaching impact, disrupting economies, straining public finances, and exposing structural vulnerabilities across nations. And moments like this inevitably accelerate the shift towards renewable energy. And the greatest gains stand to be made by communities most exposed to the fossil fuel volatility, underscoring the need for an inclusive and equitable energy transition. Across small islands, exposure to global energy supply disruptions remains high. Many countries to rely on imported fossil fuels for over 80% of their energy needs, they are vulnerable. With transport costs often twice those of developed countries, these pressures are cascading across multiple economic sectors. Rising fuel costs are driving up airfares, impacting food imports, tourism, and connectivity. In some cases, disruptions have required emergency responses, from securing alternative fuel supplies, as we have seen in Maldives, for instance, to declaration of state of emergency to manage electricity and fuel consumption, like in Tuvalu and Marshall Islands. One thing that I think now we have all learned well, even learned in a bitter way, is that energy security is no longer about stockpiling fuels. It demands a fundamentally different approach from one established 50 years ago. Today, it centers on renewables and storage, on electrification, and on decentralization. At IRENA, we have been working to guide this transition, and last week we released a policy advisory outlining targeted measures to provide relief to the current energy crisis. For SITs, near-term priorities, obviously, what you can look into the efficiency side, how to improve energy efficiency, more conserve energy, and also reduce peak demand. Some fiscal incentives that you can offer that will lower costs without complex structural reforms, easing tariffs or non-tariff barriers for equipment, for renewables equipment, or encouraging more efficient transport use. But those short-term actions are important, but they are not enough. And over the medium to long term, the focus must shift to strengthening energy systems. And this means accelerating renewable deployment, investing in grid infrastructure, scaling up storage, and improving system flexibility to integrate higher shares of variable renewables. Stable and predictable policy and regulatory frameworks to attract investment, alongside faster electrification. I think that's one of the key words. And stronger domestic and regional supply chains will help reduce long-term import dependency. Electrification, I think you hear it more and more lately, because in fact, energy transition is largely relies on electrification of end use. Because it is about how we can produce solar and wind at low cost, and then how we can couple it with decarbonizing end-use sectors, which provides an immediate pathway to reduce fuel dependency across buildings, mobility, as well as in industrial and commercial systems. As electrification advances, it will reshape energy systems, driving higher electricity demand on one side, and that will also shift the consumption patterns, but also requiring a more flexible, responsive, and resilient grids. And islands should assess what electrification means for their own energy systems, their energy security, and overall economic competitiveness. Small islands also need a realistic view of how new technologies fit into their transition. Digitalization and AI, these are the buzzwords you hear a lot lately. They can improve grid management by optimizing demand, enhancing renewable forecasting, and strengthening system stability, especially where flexibility is limited. However, deploying AI also depends on reliable data, robust digital infrastructure, and capable institutions. Yesterday, you heard also from Director General mentioning about our recently launched Grid Modernization Toolkit for SITs. And with this toolkit, in fact, we support utilities and governments in strengthening system flexibility, resilience, and reliability as renewable penetration increases in their own systems. Additionally, we have brought together utilities and technology companies under the Utilities for Net Zero Alliance, and their sole purpose is also to strengthen grid readiness, advance digitalization, and accelerate electrification. Many islands have ambitions with green hydrogen, where its use is, in our analysis, relevant for decarbonizing hard-to-abate sectors where direct electrification is not feasible. And this is some of the energy-intensive industries, iron and steel, fertilizer, cement, or long-haul ship transport, also aviation sector. These are the sectors that we see green hydrogen would mean a lot in the future. There are some cases also using green hydrogen as a storing environment where you have the surplus generation from solar and wind, and then you can use green hydrogen. But also the export potential. I think that's the one attractive dimension that many islands pursue that. But it is very important that each and every island should make their own assessment within that picture and where these green hydrogen development ambitions fall and how realistic and how competitively you can be part of that market. We are seeing growing efforts at the regional and country levels to expand markets, as small and fragmented systems limit economies of scale and weaken the investment case. And in the Caribbean, we work with partners across 3 streams of work. In fact, they are very complementary and we implement it in a very integrated way. On the one hand, we support the development of larger capital-intensive geothermal development and other renewable energy projects. And then we are trying to expand the consumption sectors across a wider Eastern Caribbean markets. That's the interconnectivity dimension. And also, we are trying to look into bundling projects to pool equipment procurement and improve cost efficiency. So on the one hand, what we are trying to do to focus on large projects and justify those projects, whether we can expand the market to justify those projects, those large investments. But on the other hand, whether we can bundle those small projects to make them larger, at least for the purpose of procurement. And our whole ambition is, at the end of the day, how we can provide lower cost energy to the islands, how we can make it more affordable for the islanders. And we have a dedicated platform at IRENA created more than 10 years ago, SITS Lighthouses initiative. We brought together all islands, SITS, partners under that framework, close to 100 of them altogether. And we do a lot of also country-level cooperation in that context. One important dimension I would like to highlight, because yesterday also it was presented in the opening presentation, scene-setting presentation, that the focus on these cash crops. Because those decentralized systems, it is extremely important that how we can integrate it into the agricultural and health sectors and creating value. And those energy is becoming an enabler of the sectoral development rather than the center of discussion. Thank you very much. These are the remarks that I wanted to highlight for our discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Gonal, for those remarks, and we appreciate the great support that IRENA has given for transition for renewable energy in small island developing states and islands generally. Now I'm delighted we're joined by a good friend of Island Innovation, Mr. Jean Leon, the Executive Director of the Nature Bank, that is doing fantastic work on looking at really innovative ways to finance and bring new financing for different types of islands. So Jean, over to you.
Good morning, all. Protocols observed. Let me just acknowledge any excellencies in the room, participants. First, it is a privilege to join you in Gran Canaria for the opening of this summit. Islands live at the frontier of the greatest test of our time. We face climate shocks, biodiversity loss, energy insecurity, debt stress, and social pressures, not as separate problems, but as one interconnected reality. Yet, too often, the world still responds in fragments. A climate project here, a debt work out there, a biodiversity fund somewhere else. We keep financing symptoms in silos, while the system itself remains misaligned. Our problem, therefore, is a paradigm gap, a gap on how to finance what strengthens the planet's balance sheet and society's productive capacity. So my central message this morning is that island economies need a different operating logic. a systems control approach built around 3 ideas: a paradigm shift for concept, policy tools for design, and partnerships for implementation. Put differently, what island economies need are not just more finance, but different finance, mission-oriented, interlinked, and anchored in a regenerative paradigm. So the first of the 3 pillars, a paradigm shift, a move from GDP to resilient prosperity. The starting point must change. GDP remains useful as a flow measure, but not as a measure of whether we are building or liquidating the productive base on which future prosperity depends. The World Bank's Changing Wealth of Nations reminds us that sustainable development requires non-declining real wealth per capita. The Dasgupta Review states that our economies are embedded in nature, not external to it. For islands, regenerating reefs, mangroves, watersheds, soils, human skills, social trust, and institutional capability are investments in building the comprehensive wealth of nations. When these are degraded, growth can conceal real impoverishment. Indeed, growing GDP while ignoring the consequential costs to natural ecosystems and society is merely illusionary growth. So therefore, what we measure is critical. The question is not how fast output is growing. The question is whether comprehensive wealth is growing. Are we keeping development within an operationally safe ecological space, given 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries are already transgressed? In other words, are we ready to move to a balance sheet of the planet mindset? This shift in paradigm means moving from isolated projects to integrated portfolios, not just for procurement, but portfolios in concept. So a seawall without watershed management will underperform. A hospital without water and energy security will underperform. Climate-smart agriculture without storage and logistics will underperform. The reality is that economies function through complementarities, and isolated projects fail because the system around the project was never designed. Our public sector investment programs should address how well an integrated portfolio sustains the system that supports life and society. Second, how do we make finance fit for purpose? A paradigm shift means tools and policy instruments must also change. Island development should be measured, appraised, and financed as a sustainable system. That is why the Nature Bank advocates portfolio benefit cost analysis and a systems control to ensure that what we finance builds resilient prosperity rather than short-lived gains. Indeed, we know prosperity that collapses at the first shock is not prosperity. It is instability in slow motion. Second, systems risk-return management is essential. Conventional finance rewards short-horizon yields and misprices vulnerability as permanent credit weakness. If we continue to undervalue resilience, diversification, and recovery capacity, we will continue the crisis of mispricing and high capital cost, and our risk measures will therefore not include, as they should, avoided losses, preservation of natural capital, or stronger institutional capacity. And third, we need our financing ecosystem to finance with a purpose, making resilient prosperity a governance priority, designing instruments that support sustainable outcomes, and optimizing balance sheets to mitigate systems risk and value systems regeneration. To do this, we need to unlock the value of nature by acknowledging that healthy ecosystems generate real economic services, protection, water security, carbon value, tourism value, fisheries value, and lower disaster losses. Indeed, we can argue what gets measured, verified, and rewarded gets financed and scaled. Policies must aim to mitigate risk profiles. What that means essentially is we need more state contingent and performance-based instruments, more guarantees and first loss structures, more risk sharing, more parametric features, and greater use of data, technology, and capacity building to implement and reduce failure risk. Specifically, and I want to highlight this, capacity building is not something we should be adding on. It's an endogenous risk mitigation tool, a tool that helps lower the cost of capital. And therefore, what we need, and I need to urge you, is the need to build stronger institutions and to use better data and robust governance to help lower the cost of capital. The third pillar is partnerships. A new paradigm and better policies will not deliver transformation if our institutions remain fragmented. Let's stop treating blue finance, green finance, climate finance, and biodiversity finance as separate conversations. Let's stop acting as if public finance, private finance, national policy, and multilateral support can be optimized independently. They cannot. The future belongs to interoperable systems. And that is why we argue partnerships must be structured. Governments, multilateral development banks, national development banks, development partners, credit enhancers, insurers, investors, regulators, each hold part of the solution. The challenge is aligning to one, shared outcomes, standards, and implementation platforms. The Nature Bank is built around this proposition, integrating investment identification and appraisal, promoting adequate and affordable finance, and ensuring capacity building is embedded within a coherent systems approach, while underpinning partnerships across geographies, themes, stakeholder groups, and instruments. In conclusion, the choice before us is not between development and nature, or between resilience and growth. It is between a fragmented model that repeatedly reproduces vulnerability and a systems model that builds durable prosperity. Let us therefore commit to a new paradigm that measures what truly matters and uses tools that finances fit-for-purpose investments. And let us build partnerships strong enough to move from pilots to portfolios, from ideas to implementation, and from recovery to resilient prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean, for that overview. Now, for our final speaker, will deliver his address in Spanish, so I'll invite you to use your interpretation devices if you wish. And it's my real pleasure to invite the visionary who's behind much of what you're seeing in Gran Canaria and who has invited us to be here today for the Global Sustainable Island Summit. Raul Garcia Brink is the Counselor for Environment, Knowledge, Climate and Energy at the Cabildo de Gran Canaria, and is someone that we've had the pleasure of working with for the last year to bring everything you're seeing here together. So Raul, I want to give you a big thanks for all the work that you've done, and over to you to deliver your intervention.
Okay, thank you, James. I will try to make my speech in Spanish because I feel more comfortable, and I think that I can do everything more faster and than in English. Okay. Bueno, pues muy buenos días a todos. Yo soy un cargo público, soy un político que trabaja en una institución local, y a mí me cuesta bastante hablar de la visión global. La visión global yo creo que todos tenemos bastante clara o bastante claro hacia dónde tenemos que ir, pero yo como cargo público en una institución local me muevo en el ámbito de lo concreto, me muevo en un día a día bastante complicado, en el que normalmente lo que tenemos que hacer, tanto yo como mi equipo, es luchar en muchas ocasiones contra los elementos, contra la burocracia, contra, en fin, cuestiones muchas veces muy complejas que hacen que nuestros proyectos pues, tarden incluso pues, muchísimos años, en algunas ocasiones, en salir adelante precisamente por esa complicación. Por lo tanto, yo me voy a centrar en cuestiones muy concretas y, si me lo permiten, voy a empezar con una pequeña historia. En el año 2017 yo me encontraba en esta zona pasando mis vacaciones y, bueno, sufrimos uno de los mayores incendios que ha sufrido la isla de Gran Canaria. En el año 2017, en verano, pude contemplar desde la terraza del hotel en el que estaba pasando mis vacaciones cómo los aviones, bueno, pues los hidroaviones bajaban y tomaban agua del mar para hacer frente a uno de los mayores incendios. Hay unas fotos por satélite donde podemos comprobar el bocado, la mordida de aquel incendio en el territorio de la isla de Gran Canaria. Y desde luego para mí aquel momento fue un momento, ya era muy consciente del cambio climático. Yo provengo del movimiento ecologista y siempre lo he tenido muy claro. Pero aquello para mí fue, vamos a decir que supuso un punto de inflexión, porque nos dimos cuenta, yo ya trabajaba en el Cabildo, de que no bastaba solamente con la mitigación, además, sino que también teníamos que trabajar la adaptación al cambio climático. Y ahí comenzó, por ejemplo, pues, todo el trabajo que estamos haciendo. Hoy en día tenemos un sistema de alerta temprana en incendios. Estamos detectando las columnas de humo con casi 50 cámaras desplegadas por toda la isla. Esto es adaptación al cambio climático basada en la tecnología, con inteligencia artificial, que ayuda también a nuestros responsables de emergencia a evaluar lo que está ocurriendo y a tomar decisiones lo más racionales y lo más rápidas posibles, ¿no? Entonces, a partir de ahí, incorporamos de manera muy importante no solamente la mitigación, que ya lo estábamos haciendo, sino también la adaptación. Y aquí, en esta zona, donde estamos hoy, pasando unos días en hotel y participando en el Global Sustainable Islands Summit, tenemos un proyecto, por ejemplo, que se denomina Impulsa Más Palomas, en el que estamos combinando la adaptación al cambio climático y estamos combinando también la mitigación. Si se dan, no les voy a decir dónde, pero paseos por toda esta zona turística, van a encontrarse lugares, por ejemplo, aparcamientos, zonas antropizadas, zonas que ya están construidas, donde estamos construyendo plantas fotovoltaicas, en muchos casos con pequeñas baterías asociadas y con puntos de recarga para vehículos eléctricos. A mí me gustaría destacar que, por ejemplo, en estos momentos estamos desarrollando 40 proyectos de renovables, almacenamiento y movilidad eléctrica en la isla de Gran Canaria. Y no solamente estamos haciendo eso, sino que también dentro de este proyecto, en esta zona, estamos desarrollando, por ejemplo, un sistema urbano de drenaje sostenible. Porque no sé si se han dado cuenta de que muy cerca de aquí, los que hicieron la visita a las dunas de Maspalomas, existe una charca, un pequeño lago con agua salobre, y cuando llueve, cuando tenemos fuertes lluvias, el agua llega contaminada a la charca. Y entonces, bueno, pues estamos intentando esas aguas derivarlas, esas aguas que vienen por esas calles, ¿no? Recogiendo aceite de coches, etcétera, etcétera, bueno, pues llevarlos a una zona ajardinada con plantas endémicas, con un sistema de filtrado para que después ese agua llegue mucho más pura a la charca de Maspalomas. Bien, para nosotros eso es adaptación al cambio climático. Adaptación y mitigación es pedir permisos a la administración. Nosotros somos administración, pero le tenemos que pedir permisos a otras administraciones, sacar adelante proyectos de mitigación, de adaptación, como estamos haciendo ahora mismo en la isla de Gran Canaria, donde estamos, por poner un caso, desarrollando. Este año vamos a llegar a 100 puntos de recarga para vehículos eléctricos. Y esta visión de aquí, de Maspalomas, la podemos extender a toda la isla, ¿no? Algunos de ustedes tuvieron la oportunidad ayer de visitar el Salto Bechira. Son 200 megavatios, ¿no? de almacenamiento, que va a ser clave para poder mejorar nuestra penetración de energías renovables. Pero a mí me gustaría también decir que vamos a llegar casi a 1 millón, ¿no? de metros cúbicos de agua disponible para la agricultura. Por lo tanto, no es solamente un proyecto de hidrobombeo clásico como una batería, sino que al mismo tiempo estamos produciendo un exceso de agua, un sobrante de agua que va a ir a la agricultura. Por lo tanto, es un proyecto también de adaptación al cambio climático. Por lo tanto, creo que tenemos que buscar esa combinación entre mitigación y adaptación, y eso es algo que estamos intentando hacer en la isla de Gran Canaria. También lo estamos haciendo con innovación, porque no solamente tenemos este proyecto de hidrobombeo con agua dulce, agua que tenemos que desalar. A mí me gustaría recordarles que en la isla de Gran Canaria tenemos alrededor de 40 desaladoras, algunas muy pequeñas, otras muy grandes, pero para que se den cuenta también de lo que supone vivir en una zona donde hay escasez de agua, pero donde vive una población muy importante y donde hay también pues 4,5 millones de turistas todos los años y, por lo tanto, la huella, la presión sobre los recursos de la isla es muy importante. No solamente son 40 desaladoras, tenemos alrededor de 170 presas, 170 embalses también, construidos desde hace muchas décadas porque la escasez de agua hizo que, y por eso podemos aprovechar también estos embalses para construir el hidrobombeo. A mí me gustaría también destacar que lo estamos haciendo con innovación porque en estos momentos estamos constituyendo una iniciativa público-privada para constituir una empresa que impulse proyectos de hidrobombeo con agua salada, es decir, sin desalar el agua, con un solo embalse, muy cerca de la costa, ¿no? Nosotros calculamos que tendríamos que construir entre 4 y 5 proyectos de ese tipo para poder ser soberanos energéticamente en el año 2040, porque nosotros tenemos una agenda de transición energética, una Clean Energy Transition Agenda en la isla de Gran Canaria que establece, ¿no? Que si queremos llegar al 92-93% de penetración de renovables, vamos a necesitar también mucho almacenamiento. Y ese almacenamiento no solamente lo tenemos con proyectos de hidrobombeo, también tenemos almacenamiento con baterías. En estos momentos estamos muy cerca de aquí, en un polígono industrial, estamos construyendo una batería muy importante de 12 megavatios hora y ya hemos construido también en el Gran Canaria Arena, en nuestro polideportivo, donde juega el equipo de baloncesto y al lado está el estadio de nuestro equipo de fútbol y ya los partidos nocturnos se celebran por la noche, se celebran los partidos de baloncesto y de fútbol y también los conciertos con energía 100% renovable, puesto que ahí tenemos una planta fotovoltaica de 800 kilovatios y somos capaces, ¿no?, de almacenar esa energía. Por lo tanto, en una isla donde hay vertidos, donde hay curtailments, en el mes de junio, el año pasado, en el 2025, el 25% de la energía que se produjo renovable que se produjo en esta isla no se pudo integrar dentro del sistema porque no tenemos todavía suficiente almacenamiento. Por lo tanto, para las islas, si quieren transitar hacia un mundo más sostenible, vamos a decir que el almacenamiento es clave. Después hay otras cuestiones como la economía circular. En fin, a mí me gustaría sí terminar diciendo que trabajar en una institución local, en una isla como Gran Canaria, significa trabajar en la trinchera, con planificación, por supuesto, pero tenemos problemas, nodos saturados, en fin, en el ámbito energético tenemos muchos problemas, burocracia, problemas de financiación también en muchas ocasiones. Pero yo creo en una cosa, y es que tenemos que pasar de las palabras a los hechos. El cambio climático, la acción climática tiene que estar en el ADN de la agenda política de todos los gobiernos insulares. Nosotros lo estamos haciendo en el Cabildo de Gran Canaria y hemos puesto recursos y personas para trabajar en ello. Y creo que si se quiere, se puede. Y yo creo que nosotros, en ese sentido, pues estamos intentando ser un ejemplo, una referencia, porque entendemos que cuando estas políticas forman parte de la agenda política de un gobierno, las cosas al final terminan saliendo, al final podemos ver los resultados. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Raúl, y quiero agradecerles de nuevo en el Cabildo por todo el apoyo durante los últimos meses. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this opening panel. It was great to see these different interventions to kick off the first day from visions from different parts of the world and also perspectives from development banks and from multilateral institutions. Now we'll be wrapping up and we'll be followed by another panel focused on the energy transition. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you again to our panelists.
Honorable speakers, thank you very much for this insightful vision, a global vision, and this overview you have made of the situation. We will have a couple of minutes before the next panel, before the next session, so we appreciate your patience. Thank you very much.
Dear attendees, please don't leave the room. We have the session coming right up in 1 minute. Please stay seated. Thank you. Estimado asistente, la sesión va a iniciar en 1 minuto. Por favor, manténganse sentados. Gracias. Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. We will start the session right away. Estimados asistentes, por favor tomen sus asientos. Vamos a iniciar la sesión en breves segundos. Muchas gracias. Ladies and gentlemen, a kind reminder to please take your seats because we will start in the session. Thank you. Estimados asistentes, por favor, tomen sus asientos. Vamos a dar inicio a la sesión. Muchas gracias.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we now move to our next session, Resilient Island Grids, Storage, Stability and High Renewable Futures, which will focus on the innovative technologies and strategies enabling resilient island grids. This panel is moderated by Hanna Marcinkowski, Senior Consultant in Holbæk Kommune in Copenhagen. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you. Yes, also welcome from my side to the first technical session here at the GSIS. On resilient island grids, where we will explore storage, stability, and high renewable futures. Yes, as Laura said, my name is Hanna Marcinkowski. I'm a sector specialist at Island Innovation and an energy consultant in a Danish municipality working on a German-Danish energy island project. Born on a German island, I was lucky to do a PhD on the role of island in energy planning. And here, often, maintaining grid stability and reliability becomes critical. Together with 4 speakers today, we will explore the innovative technologies and strategies enabling resilient island grids from different angles. We look at integrated planning, near-term investments, different technologies and local approaches from Gran Canaria, the Caribbean, and from the United States of America. The speakers will each have a short presentation, and afterwards we're happy to welcome any questions from the audience. So let me introduce our first speaker, Dr. Peter Lilienthal, Senior Advisor and Consultant in the distributed energy industry. Please have the floor.
Thank you. And you know, I've always felt that islands are the vanguard of the energy transition. They've always had the highest power costs because they have to rely on liquid fuels, primarily diesel, but also sometimes heavy fuel oil. This means that they are the first place that renewable energy became cost-effective. There's also tremendous variety among islands in terms of climate, terrain, social and economic conditions, and culture and politics. Some of them had hydro and geothermal resources, but places with exceptional resources like Iceland are special cases. Solar and wind are the relatively new and rapidly improved technologies whose variability requires new planning and operational strategies that I'll focus on. In particular, the sun shines everywhere, and many islands have good wind resources. This is going to be a historical perspective, starting back in the 90s when I created the Homer software at NREL, and when solar was still very expensive, and the focus back then was on wind diesel systems. I do have slides. Are they going to? They're not necessary. Okay. Batteries have also had incredible technological development, so I'll focus first on how they are key to the renewable transition. When I first started working with islands in the mid-90s, the only batteries available were lead-acid batteries that weren't at all durable. Developers hated dealing with them, so many of the early systems were so-called fuel-saver systems that didn't use any storage. The diesels all kept running at lower loads, so there was no O&M savings. They did save some fuel, but they also pushed the diesels to operate at a lower load where the fuel efficiency was worse, making the fuel savings modest. In larger systems with multiple generators, the real savings comes from turning off at least some of the diesels. By leaving much of the diesel capacity online, they could rely on their rotational inertia to provide ancillary services, in addition to the energy and power. Redispatching the diesels and turning some of them off only required enough storage to ride through short lulls in the resource, 15 minutes of storage would be enough to give operators time to get another diesel online if the lull turned out to be longer. Another way to look at the island's energy transition is through the role of diesel. In the beginning, diesel was the primary source, and renewables were just a small retrofit that didn't change much because there weren't any good storage options back then. Now it is all about creating an optimized hybrid system where the diesel and storage work synergistically together. That was the purpose of the Homer software I created. With lithium batteries, it can make sense to have hours of storage and have systems with truly substantial amounts of PV, wind, and storage. This in turn leads to significant amounts of diesel curtailment and savings. Solar, wind, and batteries all rely on inverters to connect to the grid. So instead of relying on the inertia of the rotating mass inherent in fuel-fired systems, the ancillary services such as voltage and frequency support, reactive power, and especially fault current must be supplied by power electronics. This is entirely possible, but it is newer technology and is less simple and requires new expertise. The goal now is to have systems that are primarily renewable, with diesels playing a minimal role just as backup. When people now talk about 100% renewable systems, it's really important to distinguish between systems that are 100% renewable some of the time versus systems that are 100% renewable all of the time. Trying to run a system without the rotational inertia of a diesel generator is tricky. It is possible for power systems, especially smaller ones, to run without diesels online, but it requires grid-forming inverters instead of simpler grid-following inverters. This involves a high level of power engineering, and having substantial controllable loads also really helps, and there's great potential for load management to help with high penetration renewable systems. Many loads, especially some large ones, can be curtailed for a certain amount of time because they have their own inherent storage. Electric vehicles are a perfect example because they have large batteries and often only need to be sufficiently charged by the next morning. Water pumping and desalination is also controllable because water is easy to store. Even heating and cooling can be controlled when needed for short periods. This flexibility to control a significant amount of loads on very short notice without detracting from the ultimate energy service that they provide is really valuable. It's a very different story to be 100% renewable all of the time. There are two ways to accomplish this. The simplest but least economical is to overbuild the PV or wind and storage to cover multi-day lulls in the wind or multi-day cloudy periods. Very uneconomical. The second way is by controlling the loads during those periods. This first approach requires long-duration storage that simply doesn't exist commercially yet. The load management approach is technically feasible, but requires new software, communications, regulations, and operational changes. There's a lot of potential there, but this is a research challenge, not an immediate deployment opportunity. The sustainability challenge should be to reduce fossil fuel use as quickly as possible and as much as possible now. Fuel consumption can be reduced fastest by focusing on the most economical opportunities now, as opposed to worrying about eliminating the last few percentages of fuel consumption. After we get to 90% renewable on an annual basis, then we can look at newer technologies for those last few percentages. Those newer technologies will probably have improved by then, and the approaches to 100% renewable that people are thinking about now will have become obsolete. I was going to talk quite a bit about how hydrogen falls into that category of things that might be interesting to get that last few percentage out, but aren't really appropriate for large-scale deployment now. But in the interest of time, because we're behind time, I'm going to just say that when we see hydrogen being used for industrial feedstock, mostly for producing fertilizer, that's an area that requires none of the infrastructure required for using it as a fuel which requires storing, a very difficult molecule to store, or the thermodynamic losses of turning it back into electricity, first we'll see it as an industrial feedstock. When at that point, we can start to think about potential other uses, but we should see, first we want to see that use before we see other uses. So there's a lot to do right now to get to that 90%, and that should be our goal, and it's one that's eminently doable with existing technology.
Thank you very much. To shorthand. And let us continue with Gran Canaria, Mr. Yonai Concepcion Godema, Head of Strategic Project Service and Technical Director of Gran Canaria's Water Council. Please.
Okay. Now, buenos días. Me gustaría empezar, como no puede ser de otra forma, felicitando a la organización por este éxito de congreso, esta cumbre. Pues realmente no hay más que ver el aforo y la agenda que nos espera estos días para conocer el alcance de lo que nos vamos a enfrentar y, cómo no, dar las gracias por la invitación para hablar de este proyecto, hablar de lo que es el aprovechamiento hidroeléctrico Salto de Chira. Como comentaba el consejero antes, Raúl, es un proyecto del Cabildo de Gran Canaria en el que todas las áreas estamos implicadas y que la verdad que tengo la suerte de dirigir, pero que detrás de todo este trabajo hay un gran equipo de todo el Cabildo de Gran Canaria. Me gustaría empezar con esta diapositiva. Esta diapositiva es la estructura de generación de un día cualquiera del pasado mes de octubre, concretamente del día 30. Y lo que me gustaría llamar la atención es la contribución que tiene la generación fósil, el ciclo combinado y la turbina de vapor principalmente dentro de esa estructura para atender a esos 500 megavatios de demanda punta y el valle que teníamos ese día de unos 300 megavatios. Sí que es cierto que el final del año es una época en calma del alisio en la isla de Gran Canaria, con lo cual disminuye mucho la generación eólica, pero sí que lo que es importante es que con esa estructura de generación, la contribución que hicieron las energías renovables en el uso final de energía en el año 2025 alcanzó únicamente el 25,9%. ¿Y por qué? Gran Canaria es un sistema eléctrico aislado, un sistema eléctrico por lo tanto más débil y vulnerable, y con lo cual la integración de energía renovable tiene un reto mucho mayor. Tiene un reto mucho mayor por la importancia que tiene mantener siempre el estricto equilibrio entre generación y demanda. Y para poder mantener ese estricto equilibrio entre generación y demanda, con esos 434 megavatios renovables que tenemos instalados en la isla, tenemos que darle o dotar a la isla de mucho almacenamiento. Y dentro de las tecnologías de almacenamiento, todas necesarias en la transición energética, la base para poder tener garantía de suministro y seguridad del sistema es el almacenamiento hidráulico, las centrales hidroeléctricas reversibles. Bien, teniendo eso claro, el Consejo Insular de Aguas, organismo autónomo del Cabildo de Gran Canaria, en el año 2010, fundamentado en la reglamentación del dominio público hidráulico, tramita la concesión para aprovechar hidroeléctricamente parte de los embalses generados por las presas de Chira y de Soria. A la izquierda Chira, a la derecha Soria. Siendo nuestro concesionario Red Eléctrica de España, Red Eléctrica de España es el operador del sistema eléctrico, con lo cual la central tiene tres funciones principales: dar garantía de suministro, seguridad del sistema y la integración de energía renovable no gestionable. Pero claro, en la imagen de la derecha ya se puede intuir a lo que nos enfrentábamos. Gran Canaria no tiene ríos. Pues desarrollar un aprovechamiento eléctrico tiene su reto. No nos habíamos equivocado. Ya desde la concesión, de la publicación de la concesión, se establecía que el concesionario tenía que desarrollar, mantener y explotar una planta desaladora que mantuviera en operación el aprovechamiento hidroeléctrico. Esta planta desaladora tiene tres funciones principales: realizar el llenado inicial de los embalses tras la ejecución de las obras, reponer las pérdidas asociadas a evaporación e infiltración y, finalmente, generar un excedente a favor del Consejo Insular de Aguas con objeto de poder atender a las demandas agrícolas en la zona. Este excedente Esta consideración no es baladí, es la primera vez que los agricultores de la zona van a tener garantía para su riego agrícola. Bien, pues para conectar ese centro de producción de agua desalada con el entorno de los embalses es necesario actuar a lo largo del barranco y para ello, complementariamente, se desarrolla la mayor restauración ambiental desarrollada en el ámbito de la Comunidad Autónoma de Canarias. 250.000 metros cuadrados de superficie en los que se eliminan todas las exóticas invasoras para potenciar la flora autóctona. De forma resumida, tenemos 2 embalses que estaban infrautilizados. Canarias es pionera en desalar agua y un barranco que vamos a restaurar. Un éxito de proyecto, todo para poder garantizar la transición energética. De forma resumida, la central se equipa con 200 megavatios en modo turbina, 220 megavatios en modo bomba, 6 francis reversibles de eje vertical, capaces de operar a velocidad variable y complementadas con un cortocircuito hidráulico y un convertidor electrónico de potencia, permitiendo unas horas de turbinado a caudal máximo de 18,17 o lo que es lo mismo, 3,63 gigavatios hora. En esta infografía, en esta diapositiva, únicamente comentarles que del proyecto, dada la sensibilidad del entorno en el que se ejecuta, se desarrolla completamente subterráneo. El 92% de la obra es subterráneo y si analizamos el perfil, es el perfil clásico de un aprovechamiento hidroeléctrico, galería de presión, conducción forzada, distribuidores de alta y baja presión y conducción de aspiración complementado con sendas tomas y pozos de compuertas en ambos embalses. Vamos, la configuración con la que hemos estudiado todos en las escuelas de ingeniería. Pero aquí llega la joya de la corona. La joya de la corona es la caverna y sus distribuidores. Disculpen, estábamos acostumbrados a centrales hidroeléctricas que generan en unos momentos y consumen energía para bombear en otros. Salto de Chira consume energía excedentaria, energía renovable que no podemos aprovechar, esos famosos vertidos o cortes, para elevar el agua al depósito superior. Posteriormente, cuando el sistema lo requiere, esa energía vuelve nuevamente al sistema. Pero lo importante, empecé diciendo que nuestro concesionario es Red Eléctrica de España, es el operador, no es un generador. Con lo cual, la energía, tanto para el bombeo como para la turbinación, interviene o participa en los despachos a precio cero. Esto es muy importante porque es la base para poder garantizar el almacenamiento y el desarrollo de la transición energética. Pero es que la central incorpora una doble regulación. La primera regulación es a través de lo que denominamos el cortocircuito hidráulico, que es conectar el grupo 1 y el grupo 2, de tal forma que el primer grupo pueda estar bombeando, es decir, consumiendo energía, y el segundo turbinando, devolviendo energía. De tal forma que recirculamos el agua entre los dos brazos contiguos, gracias al diseño prácticamente simétrico que tiene el distribuidor, de tal forma que la central está prestando servicios, servicios complementarios de regulación necesarios para el sistema eléctrico. Fruto de este cortocircuito hidráulico, ese modo de espera en el que se puede comportar la central puede pasar a entregar toda su potencia, y aquí me detengo un segundo, en menos de 18 segundos. No solo eso, de estar entregando toda su potencia, detener o contener inercia hidráulica e inercia mecánica de la central en menos de un minuto para volver a arrancar en sentido contrario. Esto es todo un hito en un aprovechamiento hidroeléctrico y fundamental para nuestra transición energética. Pero es que además fuimos un poquito más allá, desarrollamos un poquito más el proyecto, implementando un convertidor electrónico de potencia, que lo tenemos al final de la caverna, uno por cada una de las máquinas, que tiene por objeto variar la velocidad de la bomba. Variando la velocidad de la bomba, variamos caudal, y si variamos caudal, estamos variando potencia. Dos regulaciones para poder garantizar el máximo aprovechamiento de la energía renovable de nuestro sistema eléctrico. ¿En qué se traduce esto? Pues en lo que vemos en pantalla. En naranja discontinuo tenemos lo que es una central convencional, una central reversible convencional, y en azul, salto de Chira. En la primera parte, lo que es el modo turbinación, prácticamente se comportan igual. En el fondo, la regulación la obtenemos a través de los propios álabes de la turbina, pero cuando arrancamos el modo bomba es donde realmente está la magia de la central. Primero, con el cortocircuito hidráulico, que permite una mayor optimización, y la segunda en el modo bombeo. Claro, directamente los clásicos escalones de cuando arrancamos cada uno de los grupos, como no tenemos ninguno de esos escalones. Lo que tenemos es una rampa continua. Una rampa desde los menos 220 megavatios en bomba a los 200 megavatios en modo en modo turbina. Al final, lo que estamos haciendo es, en vez de tener un punto único de funcionamiento, tener un rango de funcionamiento gracias a ese convertidor electrónico de potencia. Bien, no quería dejar pasar la oportunidad, y con esto, Hannah, ya termino con unas breves conclusiones, de mostrarles alguna imagen. Ayer tuvimos una visita, incluso en la que algunos ya pudieron visitar parte de lo que vemos ahí en pantalla, del estado de avance que tienen las obras. Las obras arrancaron en febrero del año 2022 y en junio del año 2028 estaremos ya con la puesta en funcionamiento o la puesta en servicio. La imagen superior tenemos la obra de toma del depósito inferior. La obra de toma, para poder ubicarla, tiene 19 metros de anchura y 13 metros de altura. En la imagen inferior vemos la conducción de aspiración, totalmente ejecutada en hormigón armado, 5 metros de diámetro, y al final de esa imagen vemos los 3 tajamares con los que se compone la obra de toma que comentábamos anteriormente. A la derecha, en la imagen superior, vemos la caverna, ese recinto en el que estará a futuro toda la equipación para poder aprovechar la central. Y en la imagen inferior, uno de los rodetes de la turbina, un rodete Francis, como comentábamos, en este caso de unos 2 metros de diámetro. Y termino con 4 reflexiones. Salto de Chira permite alcanzar una cobertura anual media del 51% con energías renovables, un éxito dentro de la transición de lo que nos trae aquí a todos hoy, pero lo que es más importante, con garantía de suministro y seguridad para nuestro sistema. Aumenta los recursos hídricos disponibles. Es impensable plantear un aprovechamiento hidroeléctrico en el que ya no tengamos beneficios colaterales como es este, para poder atender nuestras demandas agrícolas y la puesta en valor de nuestro patrimonio. Gran Canaria tiene, como comentaba Raúl, 170 presas y muchas de ellas, o casi todas de ellas, infrautilizadas. Garantiza, fruto de la transición, de la incorporación de esas energías renovables, una reducción del 20% de las emisiones de CO2 y una reducción al sobrecoste de generación que tiene Canarias de 122 millones de euros. Recordemos que la generación en Canarias tiene un sobrecoste frente al territorio peninsular y esta central incide directamente en 122 millones de euros. Y por último, como comentaba cuando hablamos de la configuración del proyecto, la restauración ambiental es una oportunidad para preservar los valores ambientales del barranco de Arguineguín. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. Let us move on to our next speaker, Ms. Charlene Boatley, the Chief Technical Advisor at the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. When I came in a few days ago, I couldn't help but notice that there were several wind turbines that weren't spinning. I mean, it was amazing to see so many wind turbines to begin with. And I quickly learned that that was a result of curtailment. And I think this really brought home the point that resilience through an energy transition in an island setting is not merely a technology problem, but a system integration problem. And we've heard from my fellow panelists a little about technologies, storage, renewable energy. But as we continue having before us as island nations an expanding toolkit of technologies, what is missing is how we bring them together, that systems approach. At the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, we seek to support our member states, and one such way is through promoting integrated planning. So planning has long been very fragmented for our island nations, particularly in the Caribbean. We have graduated away from integrated resource plans to integrated resource and resilience plans, away from a least cost approach to a least regret approach. And we speak of, putting down solar panels. Being from the Caribbean, it is also very scary when a Category 5 hurricane is approaching and you have a solar farm that is functioning and thriving. With the fear that these panels are destroyed. We also have not managed to secure systems like insurance systems for our renewable energy systems on small islands, and these definitely leave us even more vulnerable. And so when we speak of resilience and the technologies before us. In many of our Caribbean islands, for example, we have our geothermal resource. However, islands or countries continue to pursue the resource without a longer-term view. And we're hearing a lot about the emerging molecule-based solutions. Fellow panelists spoke about hydrogen and ammonia. But are we already planning in a way that also looks at the future demand? And therefore, are we seizing the opportunity to ensure that we're developing geothermal plants that exceed the base load or peak demand of today? And are we using that opportunity, therefore, to grow industries around the energy sector? Are we thinking of how we integrate energy systems? I am a fan of pumped hydro storage, not because we've proven it for the Caribbean, but because it is certainly something that is worth looking at. So while we continue to benefit from battery storage, and we all can agree that we're continuing to see that downward trend in the cost of BESS, but are we also looking at all of the options available to us and investigating them thoroughly? Now, I know I have presented a number of problems, and I would hate to leave you without any examples of solutions that we're implementing in the Caribbean. Our reality, though, in the Caribbean is, and I'm sure in all island states, is the fact that our utilities are stretched thin. Our utilities are literally fighting day to day to keep the lights on. We have a system that is typically governed by operators that are simply operating as a static system. And we must transition to having managers, not simply operators of our grids, but managers of our grids that is done in a way that is dynamic. And so I must mention the importance of capacity building in the context of resilient island grids. And we must take a very serious and strategic approach to building the capacity of those that should be managing the grids. One other issue in the Caribbean, and we're trying to find a solution for that, is fragmented procurement. As it stands, and when a small island nation, developing nation, like a Caribbean island, receives a funding opportunity to implement a solar project, that is as much as what your procurement will allow. You procure for that solar project. And as we continue to increase the penetration of renewables, we need to move away from procuring technologies to procuring systems. So an integrated procurement approach. So we're not just procuring for a solar farm, but you're procuring your grid modernization or grid infrastructure systems, you're procuring solar, and that is done in a manner that is integrated. At the CICRI, we are really looking forward to implementing pool mechanisms, because we've heard time and time again, we've seen examples around the world of economies of scale and how harmonizing approaches can really help to close the gaps. And so, as opposed to one island trying to procure for a small 10 megawatt solar farm, how can we bring that together? I think this was mentioned in the earlier session as well. How do we harmonize our regulatory environment and reduce transaction costs for countries so that they are then enabled and empowered to take that full systems approach, that integrated procurement approach?
Thank you. And our last speaker for the session is Mr. David Gums, Director of the Global Island Energy Center in the Rocky Mountains Institute. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here, and thank you, fellow panelists, for those excellent points of view on resilience. and energy systems for the islands at the Rocky Mountain Institute Global Islands Program, which I am excited to say that we are now expanding our program from what was primarily a regional program, working with Caribbean islands, over 20 Caribbean islands over the past 10 years. We are now expanding our work to a global islands facility where we can support islands globally, because one of the things that we've seen that has, well, there are many commonalities across the islands, right? One is high costs. You would have heard some of the other panelists here talk about some of the costs associated with generating energy. But resilience is a big factor that impacts all our systems, all our island systems. We're isolated systems. We're not connected to a national grid where we can spread the risk, spread the, excuse me, spread the cost, and also share the burden. We have to basically, in most cases, have one centralized generation plant, usually from fossil fuels, which means that we're exposed not only to the climate events that are occurring more frequently and in more powerful ways, but we are now faced with the geopolitics of the day and all the implications of that leads to lots of risk around managing our costs and our economies. So energy is such a significant factor to each and every one of our economies that we really have to consider all resilience from all aspects. And one of the things that we tend to lean in on, and we call our transition playbook for islands, because we realize that there's limited resources, limited capacity, excuse me, limited resources and limited capacity on islands, and that basically inhibits our ability to do this and do it in a more efficient and expedited way. And you would have heard about, many of the, Peter talk about the pathways and how islands can get there. So the technology exists, the solutions exist, but why can't we do it and why can't we do it faster? And, and that's where we go deep in the Islands program, and we work with each individual country to sort of help them navigate their own unique pathways. So despite all the commonalities, despite all the risks that we face, high energy costs, climate exposure, all of the considerations around bringing finance and resources and local available capacity to make the transition happen, looking at all the unique characteristics that each island has, because some islands have more resources of a certain type. Charlene talked about the resources that, in geothermal. Some islands have geothermals, others don't. So we have to figure out what resources each island has and what we can leverage to make particularly those first series of investments. So we help islands sort of navigate their pathways. And in doing so, immediately you understand and see that finance is one of the biggest factors in barriers to the transition. So how can we support islands in helping them to access climate finance or other finance facilities that can help them make this transition happen? So we bring sort of a finance lens to the table, and we try to be creative. And one of the things that that has to happen is, some islands have access to, let's say, for example, a Caribbean Development Bank in the Caribbean context, or other development banks, World Bank, and so forth. Others don't have access to those facilities. So how do they manage their pathway? And then we have to look at, bringing in sort of private sector and structuring deals that can be attractive to private sector. So immediately, one of the things that come to mind is scale. If you don't have appropriate scale, private sector is not very interested. So how do we make that particular deal appetizing for a private sector investment? So we work through bringing and lowering the barrier or reducing the risk to attract the private sector. So no one is going to invest $500,000 in preparing a project that has a little return on investment. So we work to bring bankable solutions, bankable projects to the table so that private sector can be attracted to those, invest in those, and create opportunities. The final 2 points I want to make is, one is, beyond some of the sort of technological solutions that are usually championed, there is so much potential and so much opportunity today in virtual power plants. And one of the things, so we can do the utility scale. We've seen many examples of those. We've seen battery storage come to the table. We see how that can work and work, very comfortably within the island context. But what we need now is to enhance our resilience, enhance our capability in grid flexibility by introducing and empowering the distributed sector so homeowners can get more involved and participate in this transition. And that way we can have a more powerful, a more resilient system that drives down cost and enhance resilience at the same time, right? So if we put in things like virtual power plants into our island grids, it allows each and every homeowner now to participate. A good example of that would be in the Barbados context. Barbados is facing a situation where basically they've had to curtail any new interconnections to the grid for the last 2.5, 3 years. And you can imagine the impact that has had on Barbados' ability to move forward and the economic impact that has had on Barbados in itself, right? Lost opportunity. Well, introduction of virtual power plants not only helps them to reduce the amount of grid investments that are required going forward, because now each and every household can participate, bring battery storage as an asset to the grid rather than in the current context where people see a lot of these small connections as a sort of a challenge or a strain to the grid. So bringing virtual power plants onto the system allows a lot more flexibility, brings more resilience. And imagine this, in the Caribbean context, or in many island contexts, where you have a storm coming through. Charlotte spoke about a Category 5 storm coming through. After a Category storm happens, in the context of Anguilla, where I was the CEO of the Anguilla Electricity Company, our last customer came on 100 days after the storm. Imagine thousands and thousands of customers that could have the ability to come back on, independent of the grid, supply themselves, supply communities. You can have microgrids. You can have a very smartly designed system that adds resilience and brings value, particularly after a storm. And speaking of storms, the last thing I'll close with is bringing in the resilience factor. No longer can we build solar systems or particular that cannot withstand a Category 3, Category 4, Category 5 storm. That's just the run-of-the-mill nowadays. Those are the types of storms that we're going to be facing, so we have to build resiliently. One of the studies that we've done post-hurricane season in 2017 is Solar on the Storm. We've done about 3 iterations of that report. I would encourage everyone to download and take a look at that report, because what it does is basically shows how we can build Category 5 resilient solar systems. Those systems, it's not about just the mechanical or engineering of the design of the system, but it's about how we can institutionalize and make those part of our day-to-day in building and thinking about renewable energy. And that is something that we don't have a choice to do. Year after year, we see where plants are completely destroyed because they're not standing up and designed appropriately to withstand the forces of these storms. And I'll close at that point.
Yes. Thank you very much. Now, we heard 4 very different perspectives and ideas about how to go forward with renewable energy and resilience on islands. I don't want to take more of your coffee break, so unfortunately we have to skip the Q&A, but I encourage you very much to approach your speakers in the coffee break or also later. Book a session in the networking app. They're very happy to take your questions also later. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, honorable speakers. Thank you, Hannah, for analyzing these resilience island grids. We will have a short break for some minutes to change things on stage, and we'll be waiting for you for the next session. Thank you very much, and please be back.